Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Life Stories. My name is Trent, and as you could probably have expected, we are back with more stories from Reddit / idontworkherelady. You know the drill, buckle in, let's get started. Our first story today is a long one with a pretty unique title. We're going to be reading Half Doinked in Costa Rica. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of spending 3 days in a delightful little beach town on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, called Samara. It was ostensibly a work trip, but truthfully, I only worked about 4 hours per day and spent the rest of time being a beach bum. When it was time to leave, I took a shared shuttle service, we'll call Awesome Bus, back to my home base near the capital city of Costa Rica, San Jose. The way these shuttles work is that the routes are broken up into multiple legs of approximately 2 hours. This means that my 4-hour trip was broken up into 2 legs, with a 30-minute stop in the middle. The stop location is usually a little touristy place with a restaurant and souvenir shop. At the shop, between legs, some people end up changing shuttles depending on their destination. This means that sometimes the 30-minute stops actually last longer, depending on how delayed some of the other shuttles are. For the first leg of the trip, my shuttle van was completely full. In fact, it was actually overbooked by one person, which means that someone would have to ride in the passenger seat next to the driver. I recognized 2 of the other passengers. They were a couple of young Swiss guys that I met in passing earlier that week. The remainder of the passengers were members of the same family from the United States. It was a dour-looking mom and dad with their 3 kids, including a teenaged boy, his sister, who appeared to be about 10 years old, and the little brother, who was probably 8 years old. By appearance, they were stereotypically U.S. Americans. Since I was the only party that was traveling solo, I took the front seat without saying anything to anyone except the driver. The first leg of the trip went relatively smoothly. Mom and Dad, seated directly behind me, seemed to be in a snit with each other over something. Their kids in the back misbehaved a little bit, and Mom chastised them. Then, Mom and Dad went back to the conversation that sounded like audio disdain. I didn't pay much attention to them because I'd arrived half doinked, and I was having a great chat with the driver. While English is my first language, my Spanish was much better than his English, so the whole conversation was in Spanish. We talked about the Costa Rican national soccer team's deep run in the 2014 World Cup. We relived the unlikely victories over Uruguay and Italy, as well as the draw against mighty England. Then, we consoled each other, remembering the quarterfinal match, when the Netherlands advanced on penalty kicks. We talked about our favorite local soccer teams. He supports the most popular domestic team in the country, Saprissa. I'm a die-hard Herediano fan. I told him that I loved jokes, and he taught me a couple of dirty jokes in Spanish that I hadn't heard before. The 2 hours passed quickly. At the end of the first leg, we stopped at a lovely restaurant for our break. I grabbed a bottle of water for the road and a mid-morning cup of coffee. I found a seat at a long bar just on the edge of the open patio, still in the shade, but with a full view of the natural world just outside. The weather was beautiful, as it often is in Costa Rica. The sky was clear, and the light breeze was just enough to knock the edge of the mid-morning heat. Also, I was still half doinked. I got a second cup of coffee, and it was good coffee. Although Costa Rica is known for producing outstanding coffee, often what is sold domestically isn't always the best. My Costa Rican friends, that are in the know, tell me that almost all the highest quality coffee is exported. However, since the restaurant was a regular Awesome Bus hub with a steady stream of foreign tourists, they were serving an excellent cup of joe. As I got halfway into my second cup, I noticed some grumbling from the Gringo family. Mom seemed distraught that the next leg of our trip hadn't yet begun. Our 30-minute break had extended to 40 minutes. I didn't notice nor care. I was still half doinked. Mom marched over to the shuttle drivers and exclaimed, "This break was only supposed to be 30 minutes long. It's been 45 minutes. When are we leaving?" Our driver said, "We leave soon, I tell you," in his heavily accented English, and then went back to low-volume conversation with his coworkers. That didn't mollify her. She repeated the question at a higher volume. "We leave in 15 minutes, the driver said, with an increasingly uncomfortable look in his face. He glanced over at me, as if to ask, "What the heck is the problem with your countrywoman here?" I gave him the universal, "What are you gonna do?" shrug, turned around, and went back to my coffee. As I lifted my cup to my lips, I felt her presence directly behind me. She tapped my shoulder, and I turned to face her. She clapped her hands in my face and yelled, "Hey, do you speak English?" In other circumstances, I may have met her aggression with more aggression, but as I mentioned before, I was half doinked, drinking a great cup of coffee, and in Costa Rica. I put a stupid smile on my face and shook my head in the negative. "Look, listen to me. I'll speak very slowly. You need to get the driver to get us back on the road." She was pantomiming the act of driving a car. I wanted to giggle. Instead, I answered again with a big, contrived smile and a few ambiguous head nods, but no response. Dang it. She clicked with her tongue, in retreat. "You would think that at least one of them would speak English." She directed back to her husband. "We're spending thousands of dollars here, and you'd think that they'd speak better English." Dad just nodded. He's not stupid. Mom went back to Dad and the kids. I went back to my amazing coffee, sporting a bemused grin. Eventually, our extended break ended, and we all headed back to the shuttle van. There wasn't much conversation on this leg of the trip. The air was tense. 2 hours later, we were running to the city, and each group would be dropped off at their individual hotel or lodging. The Swiss dudes were first to depart. As we drove to the next drop-off location, I realized that I would be the last passenger off this van. The plan formed in my mind almost immediately. Despite the fact that I was still half doinked, my thinking was sharp and I knew what to do. Our little van rambled down the narrow road, and I smiled. When we arrived at the family's hotel, our driver jumped out to handle luggage and hopefully collect a well-deserved gratuity. I jumped out of the car too, meeting up with my friend, the driver, and the family, as they collected to take possession of their substantial suitcases. As the driver was handing over the suitcases, I stood to the side, holding one of the doors open, and putting on that stupid, servile smile. Dad put a couple of bills into the hand of our driver and whispered, "Gracias." As our driver was closing the doors and the family was preparing to walk into the hotel, I cleared my voice and tightened my smile. "It was a pleasure meeting you all," I addressed my audience in a baritone chirp. "I hope that you enjoy the rest of your time in Costa Rica. Pura vida." Mom just looked at me, dumbfounded. I smiled. She coiled up, stuck out her finger, and stuttered, You speak English! It is completely unprofessional of you to not help me when I needed help. We paid $300 for this shuttle. You can't treat your customers this way." I smiled. Her anger intensified. "I'm reporting you to Awesome Bus. What is your name?" "My name is Chifriho Jones. I'm half doinked, and I don't work here, lady." That was, hands down, in all my time browsing these subreddits, my #1 favorite ending. Godspeed to you, Chifriho Jones. You beautiful human being, you. And while that one was pretty long, we actually have time for just a tiny little one left in our slot here, so the story we're moving on to now is titled, "I'm Not the Tour Guide. I'm Not Even From This Country." I guess this is the world travel episode. I was recently in Prague and decided to take a day trip out to the countryside. I got to the meeting point for the chartered bus and checked in with the tour operator. Since I had little time to kill before we left, I ran across the street to grab a coffee. I got it, walked back, and loitered by the side of the bus, finishing off my coffee, since no drinks were allowed on the bus. The driver and operator had gone inside to their office, and the rest of the group was already on the bus, so I was by myself when a very flushed man ran up to me. He was slightly panicked and didn't speak very good English. I was able to understand he was running late for the tour and thought I was the tour guide. I don't speak any Italian, but was able to point him towards the tour office so they could help him, since I didn't work there. He apologized and headed towards the office. No hysterics, but it gave me a good chuckle. I'd be a poor tour guide, especially since it was my first time in the Czech Republic. Short, sweet, kinda wholesome, way less hysterics than doinked in Costa Rica, but hey, not all of them are gonna hit the same, you know what I mean? And with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it is about that time for us to close things up. My name is Trent. Thank you so much for tuning into Life Stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Reddit content we've got cooking up coming your way, and I hope to see you guys soon.